Pandemic, furlough, recession and redundancies. For many, the last 18 months has been an uphill struggle. But for some, just keeping the power on has been a fight.
There has been times where I've had 2 or 3 duvets on the sofa, you know, just to ensure that I'm warm.
For Anthony, his 2 small children and many more, it's about to get worse, as the energy regulator is allowing energy firms to increase prices by at least £139 a year.
My family will be questioning food versus fuel in the real terms.
It's really that stark?
Yeah. We already are on a knife edge anyway with our finances. We rely on the local church, who have been fantastic to give us that little bit of food top up when we need it. Those facilities only have so much available. That will probably result in me having nights where I don't have dinner so the kids can have dinner.
From October 1st, customers on default tariffs will see their price increase capped at £139, a 12% price hike on the average bill. Prepayment customers will see their bill increase by £153, up 13%. And this comes on top of a previous lift in April, meaning that prices since last autumn have gone up by more than a fifth. This is a twice-yearly review by Ofgem, the energy regulator, who reason a rise is needed because the market price of gas and electricity has almost doubled since the last time the price cap was raised. Last year, Centrica, what everyone knows as British Gas, made almost £500 million. Scottish Power, nearly £1 billion. SSE, £1.5 billion. Why aren't they picking up the tab here as opposed to hard-up families?
Well, profits in the market as a whole, in the retail market as a whole, are around zero. They're slightly less than zero. So this is making sure that customers only pay a fair price for their energy.
Are you really expecting us to believe that energy firms are less able to foot the bill here than hard-up families?
So what we are saying is that families should pay only a fair price for their energy. We don't want to go back to the bad old days where companies charged unfair profits. And we take £1 billion out of this market every year in supplier profit and put it back into the pockets of customers.
These hikes, the highest for nearly a decade, will hit 15 million households, 2 million of them already behind on energy bills according to Citizens Advice. The energy industry insists they're not putting profits before people.
It's clearly been and going to be a really difficult period for many people. We've paid out millions of pounds through the pandemic to support customers, and the industry has got measures in place to support the most vulnerable or anyone worried about paying their bill this winter. So our message is, if you are worried, phone your supplier.
Both the regulator and the energy companies are at pains to point out that there are subsidies and payment plans for customers struggling financially. But just yesterday, the Bank of England warned that by the end of the year, inflation could hit 4%. So the cost of living is on the rise. And the government is still planning to cut the temporary uplift to universal credit, in some cases worth £20 a week. So for some families already struggling to make ends meet, the autumn is looking bleak. The charity that has been helping to feed Anthony over the last year says they're preparing for many more through the door.
We understand and are preparing for a real pent-up demand for services for Christian Against Poverty and for other debt advice organisations, which is only going to be exacerbated with the timing of these cost increases in energy, these reductions in income through universal credit, and potentially the unemployment caused through the end of the furlough scheme.
Energy firms and the regulator insist better deals are still to be had by switching suppliers. But for many already in debt, that isn't an option. And whichever way they look at it, the prospect of this coming winter is a cold one.
Well, joining me now is the Labour MP Darren Jones, who chairs the Energy Select Committee, and also Dale Vince, who founded the renewable energy company Ecotricity. Dale Vince, is it true, first of all, that there was no choice but to raise bills for consumers?
Yeah, I think what Jim said is right. If you look at the rise in wholesale prices over the last few months, I mean, they track the market forensically, so that they're spot on in terms of what's driving this. They actually control the margins that energy companies can make quite fiercely. I think the allowable profit margin is about 2 to 3%, which is kind of unheard of in any sector of our economy. And we're talking about a £2.50 a week price rise in energy, which is almost a tenth of the loss of universal credit of £20 a week. We've got to hold those two things up together and compare them.
Darren Jones, I mean, a lot of people are confused because they're saying, well, some of these companies are making huge overall profits, but that's because their profit's not in their retail business. You know, should the whole company activity be taken into account by the regulator, and should the regulator be making them take their profits elsewhere and subsidise the retail business effectively?
Well, the first thing to say is that we shouldn't be living in a country where families are having to live in these circumstances and pick between feeding their kids and heating their homes. I know, having grown up in that situation, how stressful it can be for families. And so we have to find a solution to this. There's lots of complexity around it. It's about poverty, pay and work. It's about the cut to universal credit that we've heard about. But as you say, also profits in energy companies where perhaps they could be doing more to help their customers on lower incomes. And whilst it's right to say that the wholesale price of gas has gone up and that should be reflected in what the energy companies are obviously paying for it, I think all of us need to do more to help people in these difficult circumstances.
So would Labour change the rules or not?
Well, I think the rules here actually reflect the problem that we have, in that we are over-reliant on imported gas for our heating and our electricity generation. Keir Starmer and Ed Miliband, as part of the Green New Deal, have said that we need to accelerate the pace of reform so that we have more low-carbon, smart generation of electricity here in our own country, so that we're not subject to these global fluctuations in fossil fuel prices.
Right, that's not really an answer to my question, but Dale Vince, you know, how do we sort of take out these fluctuations then? I mean, could, you know, you at Ecotricity, you know, you say that you know, it's all renewable, it's all green energy. Could all the others go the same way, and how quickly?
I think the root of the problem for us as a nation is that we're dependent on foreign markets for oil and gas for our energy supply. So we spend £50 billion every year bringing fossil fuels to our country just to burn them. That's £1 billion every week. If we spent that budget for 1 or 2 years on renewable energy, we could power ourselves entirely from the wind and the sun that we're blessed with here in our country. And we could create a time of energy abundance, and we could eradicate fuel poverty, because the price of renewable energy, once you've built the means to capture it, never goes up.
But how would we heat our homes? You know, where at the moment we are largely reliant on gas boilers.
But we have an answer in green gas made from grass. So we have enough marginal grassland in our country that's not used for food production to grow enough grass, to make enough gas to power all of Britain's homes. We don't need to force people to buy heat pumps and to take out their gas boilers. We just have to make gas in a different way, in the same way that we now make electricity in a different way.
But you're a bit of a lone voice on that, aren't you? I mean, do we have enough grassland for a start to create the biomass to create the gas?
Yeah, we did a study using DEFRA figures for land, and there's enough marginal grassland in Britain to grow enough grass to power 28 million homes, and at the same time create 70,000 jobs in the rural economy, which is where we're going to need them as farming has to transition from EU subsidies and stuff like that, and save the burning of £7 billion worth of gas every year. This is money that just goes up in smoke, out of our economy and up in smoke.
Darren Jones, what kind of concrete measures do you think we need to bring in quickly to get us to net zero and to get us to somewhere decent by 2030?
Well, I mean, there's lots of answers to that question. With respect, I did answer your last question because you invited me to comment on tweaking the rules of the regulator, but that doesn't solve the problem. It's missing the point here. We have an over-reliance on imported gas, which is a fossil fuel and subject to fluctuating prices that ultimately affect people and people on the lowest incomes in our country. So there's lots of things that we need to do. In the very short term, because of this current price rise, we need to make sure that energy companies are proactively writing to their customers and inviting them to be on the best price tariffs. We need to ensure that all of the money put forward by the regulator to help people in fuel poverty is being used in the best way. And we need energy companies to help share the load in that. But in the long term, in order to reach our net zero targets, we need government policy and the decisions on how we're going to finance our net zero transition to urgently be announced. The Chancellor has been delayed and delayed in coming forward with how he's going to pay for this. We must do it. It's right for the country and it'll be ultimately good for people, but we need to get a move on.
Do you agree with Dale Vince on biogas?
I think it can play a part. There's no one technology that will solve all of our problems.
He says it could solve the problem. I mean, is he wrong? Or?
I'm not saying he's wrong. I'm saying that there'll be a mix of technologies, whether it's biogas, whether it's electricity-powered heat pumps, whether it's living on a heat network, possibly even hydrogen in our gas systems, if that is allowed, if that's going to be safe and right for us to use in the future. I don't think politicians should say one technology is the right one compared to another, but we do know we need to move away from reliance on imported gas and move away from gas boilers.
Dale Vince?
Yeah, so since the late 90s, all gas appliances on our network in this country have been able to run on 20% hydrogen. So when we gear up to power the whole country from 100% green electricity from the wind and the sun, we simply have to oversize the fleet to make sure that we always have enough. And when we have too much, we turn it into hydrogen and we augment green gas on the grid. We do have a blended approach. I agree with that. Heat pumps will work for some people. Green gas will work for the bulk of people. And we can make hydrogen when we have excess electricity, which will happen mostly during the winter, when actually we need the heat the most.
Dale Vince, Darren Jones, thank you both very much.